So where is this headed? If you have a pretty good idea, I mean, it's
the same place it's headed every off season. In about 3 or 4 days, no, more than 3 or 4 days, but in about 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, you're all going to be heading somewhere else, because the NBA season will be over with. And for all intents and purposes, that'll be good for everybody because it's been 2 seasons in one. I know everybody's been talking about how compressed everything has been, ever since the lockout and the lockdown and the stoppage of play. And then last year in the finals and this whole season right here. So it has been a rather intense 14 months, really intense 14 months. And I think everybody's had that affect them in some way in the NBA and even with our team. And so where do we go from here, Tim, is the same thing we've done over the last 25 years. We try to get better. We have a good core. And you got to eradicate and put out of your mind, all of the thoughts that others might have about what they think you should do. I mean, we've been at this for a while. So, where we're headed first is rest. Our players, our staff, the people that have been here every day, every single day, they're mentally worn out more so than physically. And I think they just need to rest for a couple of weeks, a month. We're already planning the combine. We're already planning, summer league. And so all of those things as to what the schedule has in front of us, free agency, a draft where we don't have any picks, but I can guarantee you we'll probably get a couple of good players out of this year's draft somehow. So that's where we're headed. And then we'll deal with free agency.
I know last year you sort of suggested maybe it was time to move away or retire from the whale seeking term, but you are one of the teams with some major financial flexibility this summer. Now you have very few guys under contract, so you're gonna have to use some of that money, of course, but is the mantra that you'll go into whatever August 2nd or August 6th or whatever the date is the same?
Go. And I think you all knew last year after the season ended, for the most part, at least it was out there in this space, this NBA space, in which they talk about what teams are going to be doing with their asset base or their flexibility. And, so there's a lot of opinions out there. And we made a decision last year that, what we would do is that we were going to try to preserve, room. That's what our plan was. And we worked that, I think, as best as we could to preserve room for this year. We're going to have it. We're not going to have a max slot, but we're going to have a lot of room if we want to use that. But there's so many other ways, Tim, that you improve your team. Obviously, we like our core. There are trades that you can make. There's sign-in trades. There's, free agency. We have room, exceptions, whichever way you want to go. If you're going to be a cap team or a room team, will direct us in that manner. So I don't think you can continue to defer your room or your flexibility down the road. I mean, somewhere you have to make a decision on the 2 or 3 players that you think are your franchise, anchors, other players around them who will complement them, and players that will really add a specific fix to what our weaknesses are. People will think that our weaknesses might be we don't have the size. We got out-rebounded incredibly bad in the playoffs. Our defense was down a little bit this year. So, the kind of players that we want to bring in here have to have talent. They got to get character. How do they fit? What is it that they will fix that we need fixing? Can you trust them? Is it something that, that Spo really likes to do that he might might add to that or change, but those are the thoughts that you go through, and then you have specific players out there that you look at that can do these things for you.
All right, next we go to Barry Jackson.
Hi, Pat. A couple things. One, I meant to ask you on the night of the trade deadline. Do you and Sam Presti have an understanding of the terms that would be necessary to unlock the 2023 pick, which would thus allow you to trade 24, 25, or 26? And even though you're doing them a favor by doing that, should you ever do it, do you feel like, from the way Presti has portrayed it to you, that you would need to compensate them to do that?
Well, anytime you negotiate with anybody that has an asset of yours, then you got to find out what the cost would be. So we haven't had those kinds of discussions. We don't have any kind of understanding on anything. OKC has that pick. It's protected. And so, we'll see what happens. I think we've done, really well in this decade. We've given up a lot of picks, and then if you go back and you think about who you gave those picks up for, when we got the big three here, we do that over again. I'd do the same thing for Goran. We really never got what we thought was the kind of team that we would have, because Chris was ill at the time and really couldn't help us that much. It goes all the way back, to the times where, any kind of picks that we gave up, I thought we benefited from that. And so now we got, 7 picks out of our next 8 years, basically, and we don't have many second round picks. But Barry, to answer your question specifically, no, there's no understanding on the 23 pick.
Okay, and then my one other thing is, we've seen obviously the last couple of years in this modern NBA game, Spo likes playing someone next to Bam who has 3-point range. And I guess my question to you would be, would it increase the options you have to find a big to play alongside Bam if Bam committed himself to becoming a high quality 3-point shooter? Is that necessary in your mind, and does that need to happen quickly?
No, doesn't need to happen quickly. You have to take, as a coach, you take a hard look at all the numbers, all the metrics, the way you want to play, how he was played, how Jimmy was played. And you think about, as I said, the kind of help you might need to either compliment him, or he compliments himself by becoming a Luka Doncic, making threes on step backs and stuff. I'm just, but yeah, Spo really likes to use Bam with a stretch 5 or 4. He might have to change. You never know. He might have to think about, what's going to be the next thing in the NBA that you will require, that will require you to get somebody to sort of stay with that kind of play. So look, the game is fast paced. It's wide open. Guys are jacking threes from half court, and guys are taking bad threes that, 5 years ago, guys would probably be on the bench for taking those kinds of shots. And so that's the game, because that skill level has been taught to such a high degree and such a degree of efficiency that you have to defend a team that likes to have a lot of room to allow their players to go to the basket. Now, to get a big that can shoot threes and rebound at the same time and defend and protect the rim, that's a very unique player, and there's not many of them around. And so I think you get one or the other. You can get a 3, you can get a 5-man that can make a 3 and be a good shooter. I mean, Belly's is a great shooter from 3. Kelly was a great shooter from 3. Denman, Dwayne, he can make threes, from that standpoint. So we have the Myers Leonard. We have those kinds of players that can stretch the floor. But I'll leave that to Spo, and Spo and I'll talk about it. But those are the things that we have to think about as to style of play, and would the person be a good fit, and will he fix 2 issues or 3 issues that you need fixed.
Next we go to Anthony Chang.
Hey, Pat. Obviously, Jimmy's eligible for an extension this offseason. If he does ask for the 4-year max extension, is that a no-brainer in your eyes just because of what he's done in his first 2 years with the organization, or does a conversation need to be had just kind of about the potential salary cap implications of that type of commitment?
Well, somewhere along the line, when you have great players, all NBA players, all defensive players, players like Jimmy, that are a high level, very impactful players for you, that you're going to have to pay them what their market value is. We haven't really discussed that internally yet. So I know it's something that that's been out there in the media, but it has not been discussed. And I'm sure that when the time comes, we'll have a good conversation with Jimmy about that.
And one other thing, obviously restricted free agency gives you guys a better chance to keep your own free agents. I guess, what's your view of Duncan and Kendrick's situation as they enter this summer, looking really for their first big contracts of their career, and just kind of their development in their first 2 years with you guys?
Well, both of those players have performed at a very high level, and they've really helped us. If you think about it, K9, he averages 15 a game. He shoots 38% from three. He's a guy that can probe the defense. He can get to the basket. He can raise on threes. He can raise on floaters, on runners. He's a hell of an offensive player. He's not really a playmaker from that standpoint, or somebody who's just, okay, this is a point guard. He's going to run offense and score. But he's a hell of a player. Duncan could be considered the top shooter in the NBA. So I applaud both of these guys for coming in with, just very little reputation, no guarantees, and winning their jobs, winning their spots, and winning their time. They've had their ups and downs, but young players will. But we like both of them, and we'll see what happens with them when it comes, to the market.
You are listening live. Pat Riley, it's his season-ending press conference. You're listening live right now.
Spoke about a commitment to both Duncan and Tyler Hero. There were some rumors out there. There were some mentioned possibilities for those two. Tyler seemed to tail off a little bit at the end. I don't know if it's a sophomore slump. I don't know if it's teams getting a scouting report on him, but it was pretty dramatic. What are your thoughts on where Tyler Hero stands as an asset, as a player, as a core player?
He's a core player. That's all there is to it. Look at when we got swept by Milwaukee, that was an absolute team breakdown. It wasn't any one individual. When you get blown out like that and you get beaten by a great team, it isn't any individual. Tyler Hero is a core player for us. You might have hit it on the head, Ira. Maybe he had a sophomore jinx or whatever, but when we drafted, Tyler and KZ, and then we signed Jimmy, that was 22 months ago. And over the last 22 months, from the night that he stepped up on that stage with Adam Silver in that swag coat and necklace, was a wonderful night for him and for us. He put the Heat hat on, and then he went and electrified a lot of people in this arena and in this city, and especially our coaches in this organization. So Tyler's a core player. He'll figure it out. We'll figure it out with him. But what happened to him going down the stretch? I actually thought he got better as a player. If you think about his first year or his first 35 or 40 games, he really was strictly a catch and shoot type of player, coming off screens and catching and shooting. And the only way that he was ever going to become more of a complete offensive player is he had to improve his ball handling with both his right hand and his left hand. And he did. He's an exceptional ball handler. And now he can create space and get into gaps and raise on jumpers from almost anywhere. So this year was really a step up, not experimenting, but he did a lot of probing and dribbling and going in to the gaps and driving baseline and dribbling back out the other side. And that's sort of the nature of a scorer. And so he and K9 are scorers. And we expect his shooting now to even get even better in those situations. As far as the other parts of his games, I think as he grows up, he's going to, and what I mean grow in maturity as a player, that he'll get better across the board. But he's a core player, Ira. I'm not concerned about him.
And we've also spoken to over the years when it was Bam and Hassan, you spoke. I remember how you might talk to Eric. You can play do bigs together. It might work. Eric has his preference how he does it. This year, Precious and Bam rarely played together. And even in the second half of the season, when Dwayne Dedman came on and gave you a truer big man, still stayed away from that. Philosophically, and I know the coaches and the presidences, but do you see a possibility of Bam playing alongside a big? Or is Bam just going to be a athletic, I don't want to say undersized, but different kind of center? In other words, the power rotation, is what it is, or do you see the possibility of big? Thank you.
Well, there's a possibility of that. When you go back and look at the results, of what you've accomplished, since Bam's been here and who he has played with during that time, his game has evolved in a lot of ways, but when it comes to what Coach Spo is going to do when he pairs a front line together, it'll be situational. Situational could be every night as a starter, and then throughout the course of the game, you change your rotation. But these are questions that I think can be answered, later on by him as he evaluates this year and how Bam played and who he played with, and then what's out there and what we might bring in. So what I'm saying to you is that, yes, there's a possibility that it could be big, and there's a possibility that it could still be similar to what you've seen in the past. And the bottom line to all of that is that if the impact of that pairing doesn't equal winning, and you're not winning at a high level, you could be winning just enough. I think we're 15 games over 500 or something like that, maybe in the last 2 years. But that's something you have to think about. We'll see what happens with it.
Next, we go to Will Manso.
Hey, Pat, Jimmy was asked after the Milwaukee series how much input he would like or how much that works the conversation with the front office on what is ahead with the team. What are those conversations like? How do you lean on a Jimmy or a Bam in the direction of the club, given the NBA is so much about player relationships, players, kind of, I don't want to say handpicking, but discussing and figuring out who they want to play with in the future?
Well, I want to hire both of their agents, and then I'm going to go to their agents and ask them to come to Mickey and ask for a max contract for me. And so if he has any kind of input into what goes on in this franchise, I want Jimmy to give me a max contract.
All right, next we go to Dave Hyde.
Hey, Pat, one of the unfinished sentences this year was Victor Oladipo. Where do you see, that going from here with him?
We knew, Dave, when we made the trade that there was a risk. He ended up injuring himself, 4 games into this run, and he's had his surgery. And it would be like any other free agent that we would have on the team that sustained that injury. He'll be rehabbing with us until he's healthy enough to get out of that cast. And I don't even think there's going to be any rehabbing going on right now at all. It's just healing. He's going to let it heal and heal and heal and get strong and attached to that. From that standpoint, I think we'll just monitor them. We're going to work with them, and then we'll see what happens when in August when we sit down and talk to him.
Next, we'll go to Ethan Skolnick.
Pat, obviously Bam made tremendous progress here over the past 3 years and all-star team and everything else. What was sort of your view of his playoff series and kind of his approach to it? Is there something you want him, because there was a lot of talk about aggressiveness with him. I'm just wondering, from your perspective on the offensive end, what that means and what you may want him to improve on.
Well, if he improves this year as much as he has over the last 4 years, then you're going to get a better player next year. Now, where are those elements that he has to improve in? I think when it comes down to really taking a look at his season, evaluating a lot of film, I think Spo has to evaluate a little bit, how he uses, Bam. And Bam is one of our primary, ball handlers and gets us into offense. And sometimes there is a disconnect between running offense and really being effective as an offensive player. So I think all of these things will be worked out. But I do know that we've got, one of the highest character, toughest guys in the league that really has a lot of talent, still has a lot of upside. And I wouldn't let what happened against Milwaukee, deter me in any way, shape, or form, as far as what I think Bam can bring to it. So, all the questions that are basically coming at me are about style or what does Bam have to do to improve, or Jimmy or Duncan or Tyler or anybody, is that I think all these things over the next 4 or 5 months, guys will be working on them and the coaches will be working on them. And I think Bam, probably as much as anybody, will be working on it.
Pat, just one quick,
will help.
Pat, just one quick follow on that. In your experience, because I know he's going to be working on it, in your experience, can a player develop a takeover type mentality? In other words, if maybe they weren't, say, counted on to do that at other levels, can they develop that kind of? Because Dwayne came in and he had it immediately. I'm just wondering, with your experience in the league, is that something that can develop over time? That get out of the way and I'm going to take over here?
That's a very interesting question. And because you do have a lot of players in this league, at the top of the elite list of takeover players, that it's part of their DNA, but it's also been a learned habit from the time they were probably just starting to be great players in high school. They were the guys that were taking over games at the end of games, and right through college, if they went to college, and right in the NBA. The impact of that might not have led to a lot of winning, because you have a lot of volume scorers in this league where their teams have never won. And, one of the greatest performances that I've ever seen in a game clutch was, Lillard the other night against Denver. And God bless him. I mean, he has not won a championship yet, but it isn't because he's not a guy that doesn't have it at the end of a game. So it takes repetition in missing shots as much as it takes anything else to get the confidence to be able to take those shots, to make sure you get a great shot, to make sure you can make a number of them, and that it doesn't turn out to be a turnover. You see most of these great players who have that internal clock in their head when they have to take over a game. They master the shot clock, they master time, score, situation. They master who's out on the court, with them. And then at the end of the game, if it was up to them, just like Jimmy did in Milwaukee, when he was lined up against Giannis, that layup was going to be his. And he tied the game, and we lost in overtime on Middleton's shot. But it's as much a learned thing as it is something that just happens through repetition and confidence from the coach. And so that is something that Bam will continue to work on as he gets more and more opportunities going down the stretch to either make or miss, and win. And so, when you take a look at what happened last night, you got Kawhi, at the end of a game. It's not blaming him, but it's a make or miss. He's been in that situation so many times, and he's made more shots than he's ever missed, probably in that situation, in the biggest of moments. But he's got another game to come back to prove that he can make that shot. So Bam will learn this. He'll learn a lot from this, Ethan, this failure, I think, over the summer.
Next, we'll bring back Ira Winterman.
Sorry, slow on the trigger at my age. We saw what happened yesterday in Boston. I guess a certain logic also, keep it all in the family. The annual Pat Riley question is, you continue to grow younger for some odd reason. How long do you invest?
If I look good,
You look fantastic, Pat. Nice shave, everything. COVID-free,
I
vaccine.
get back in shape, everybody. Okay, I got a coat on, get out all that stuff. We were wearing sweatpants during, sheltering in, and get back into our uniforms.
Hey, you found a razor. Good for you.
A little one.
Is there a long view? Is there a succession plan? Sort of take us through, as of this date, where you see Pat Riley being down the short-term road.
No, I'm getting ready for the combine, and then we're getting ready for the summer league. And, we didn't have mandatory exit meetings this year for a number of reasons, but, I got to meet with at least 7 or 8 guys that I wanted to talk to. And Spo met with the younger players, the development players that he needed to talk to. We'll be in touch with players that are under contract to us, over the next couple of weeks. But I just wanted everybody to get out and rest and decompress and purge out that real sour feeling and taste in our mouth that we had after the Milwaukee series. So as far as I go, I'm ready to roll forward and try to make this team better. I think we made some great strides, and for all of our fans, out there, it was so great to be able to see the place packed. Heat and the Los Angeles Lakers were probably higher rated than Netflix in most homes, in Miami. And it was a lot of fun watching that team go through the playoffs last year. And it was just very disappointing, for us and for our fans, for our sponsors, for season ticket holders, all the people that support us. They're probably disappointed today, but just hang in there, keep the faith. We'll be back. Okay, we're going to be back as we are every year.
And it's sort of an elephant in the room. If the Bam Adebayo extension was not made or offered, same money would have been paid now. You would have had $13 million more in salary cap space and been in a different position. How difficult or not doing that, and how difficult or not is it now knowing that this offseason you have $13 million less with the exact same extension in place?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that was a decision that, he and his agent made. We did discuss every single option and picture and scenario out in front of him. And, but he deserved it. He was up for it. The guy came off an all-star year. He came off an NBA Finals year. I think the most important thing you do now in this league is when you get a great young player. Bam wasn't, a top 5 pick. He wasn't top 10 pick. And so, when you're picking in the teens and somebody really hits and improves and helps you win and is the kind of person you want that has talent, character, he's a great fit. He's great in the community. You trust him. All of those things, Ira. He did what was in his best interest, and we simply said yes. We tried to convince him that this could be different, but at the end of the day, this is what the man deserved.
Next, we go to Josh Mosier.
Hi, Pat. You mentioned earlier that everyone is mentally worn out right now. And for you specifically, what perspective did you gain over these last 16 months going through the bubble for 18 months and now the season? Just that perspective about your own career and really your personal life.
Well, it's been hard for everybody in the world. NBA players and staff and executives and writers and correspondents and television people, anybody who's involved in the NBA family or industry, it's a challenging year from the standpoint of how you used to do your job versus how you have to do it now. But in anything in life, as I said, it doesn't make any difference what happens to you. It's how you deal with it and adapt. And everybody had to adapt immediately to being sheltered in. And then we had to come back. Everybody came back, not just in basketball, but across the globe. When people started to come back, there were so many conditions and protocols that it just sort of took you out of any kind of comfort zone that you were used to. And, you know, now when you look back 14 months later and everybody's coming out of their caves and coming back into the office or starting to make plans to go on vacation or to do things, there's a hesitancy. And so I think one of the biggest things that we missed, and I wrote Andre a note the other day, and I almost apologized to him from the standpoint that when we traded for Dre and Jay Crowder and Solomon Hill, they arrived here around February the 25th, last year, and then they were sheltered. We were sheltering in on March the 11th, and then they were gone for like 2 months. We're doing Zoom things and all those one man, one coach, one mask, walkthroughs and things of that nature. So the biggest thing that we lost, and I said to Jay, I wish that you could have come to one of our Christmas parties, or you could have come to, the family festival, or a number of the team dinners, events, or things that we do in this organization and out in the community through, through our business operations and everything, exactly what it's like, because we lost the connection, a real connection. And I'm not using that as an excuse, but I think everybody sort of got a little bit disconnected. And then when you start getting around the same people you knew for years and years and years, it's a little bit awkward, from that standpoint. So now it's going to be back, I hope, to normal, somewhat next year. When the season starts, everybody's got more than enough time off to recharge the batteries. And then when we come back, I'm sure there's going to be some COVID protocols still, but they won't be as draconian as they were. We'll see what they are, but I think we're on to bigger and better things. But to answer your question specifically, I missed hanging out with everybody. I miss being together with them. I miss the parties. I miss the fun. I miss all the things we do as a team that some of our guys really didn't get to see.
Next, we bring back Tim Reynolds.
Again, you're listening to Pat Riley live. This is his season-ending press conference. Began at 3 p.m., and you are hearing it live on 790 The Ticket and 560 WQAM.
Go back to their arenas and test at 11 o'clock at night if you're playing a day game, or test in the hotel at 8:30 when you land at 3 o'clock, and you couldn't do the parties. I mean, do you think, I know it's nice now seeing the playoffs and buildings are filled, and you had a couple of those, obviously, and that's great. But was this a joyless season league-wide, not just everywhere?
Yeah. Well, I think it became common knowledge and all of the narratives and rhetoric out there about the pandemic and how hard it was on everybody. You have to keep things in perspective. As I said at the top of this session, it doesn't make any difference what happens to you, it's how you deal with it. And so, yeah, it was difficult at times, but there's no way to joy. Joy is the way. There's no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. There's no way to success. Success is the way, And you have to go through those experiences enough to really feel that. So if it was a joyless experience for a lot of people in the NBA, then somewhere they didn't make the right changes or adapt to the things they had to adapt to get some joy out of it. You always have great joy when you win. If you don't win, there's misery. And then if you don't win and there's misery and you got a test and you got to come in at 11 o'clock at night, then it gets hard. And so let's put all that behind us and put it in the past, because, today is the present moment and our future is waiting. And I hope it's a lot brighter than it was with what we showed last week.
And one basketball follow too. This was, Malik was in a new role. Karan was in a new role. Just how did you sort of evaluate where they are right now in the growth process as they or, well, Malik's been on this coaching journey, but Ron in particular, how did he handle year one, do you think?
I think both of them are great basketball people. Malik is an experienced coach now. Karan is somebody who I think's got greatness in him from a DNA standpoint, basketball standpoint, a life spent in adversity and in greatness standpoint, has a lot to offer from that standpoint. So both of those guys, I think, did a great job. As I mentioned, last year, after the finals, I was ecstatic, for all of them, and our coaching staff and the training staff, weight training staff, our nutritionists, our analytic, everybody that you talked about that might not have had some joy. I just thank all of them because they did a hell of a job, and I want all of them to come back fresh and reinvigorated and ready to go, regardless of what's in front of us from that standpoint. So, we got a great group of people here. I love them to death.
And next we go to David Lang.
Coach, there seems to be throughout the year this national narrative which tried to invalidate the success that the team had in the finals run. After the Milwaukee series, the Bucks tweeted out, "This ain't the bubble," as if to say that the accomplishments of the bubble were lesser because they occurred in the bubble. How would you answer that sort of narrative that's out there?
Well, I wouldn't have ever tweeted out something like that. But and I don't know who gets credit for that tweet or whatever. We were the best team other than the Lakers last year. And we ended up in the finals, whether it was the bubble or any place else. And so, I take pride in the fact that people will say that the Heat and its culture were best suited for the disciplines needed in the bubble. And if that's the case, then fine. Then we had a little bit of an edge. I don't think that's solely the reason, but we had some meltdowns in the bubble. It wasn't easy. But I do recall the competitiveness in those games. And most of the games that we won, with the exception of a few, were 1 or 2 or 3 possession games, in the last 5 minutes. They were clutch games, and somewhere, we made a shot that would always put us a possession or 2 ahead, and we ended up getting wins. I remember the shot that Duncan had, I think, in game 1 against Milwaukee in the overtime game. I think we were ahead 1 under a minute, and on the right side of the court, he got wide open for a 3. He got a great look at a 3, and he missed it. And that would have put us up 4, 2 possession game. We could have got out of there with a win, but sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. And so what happened to us last year in the bubble was last year, and what happened to us this year is what happened this year, and we'd have to deal with those circumstances. So I don't look at that as a slight, but when people want to jump on it and say something negative about it, then that's their problem, that's their issue.
All right, Coach, that's it. Thank you very much for joining us.
I'll go back to, who's the person that asked me about Jimmy Butler asking for advice, and I want him to give me a max contract? Who's the one that asked that question?
I don't recall.
I was kidding, obviously, right? I just want to make sure that's not the headline tomorrow. You all have a good year, okay? Have a good summer, and there'll be a lot of news coming along the way. But again, just the last shout out to our fans and to everybody is that we'll be back.